Excuse me. I'm just trying to orient myself.
I'm not answering any of your questions.
Okay.
I'm just going on.
Oh, well,
And you'll have to just see what happens.
okay.
Not
Who
great.
knows?
Not great, great.
prepared.
I guess it's better up here. Welcome, Shabbat Shalom, and Shabbat Shalom. Normally, I would be nervous up here, but do I have a microphone?
It's on.
It's on. Can you hear me? Okay. Normally, I would be a little nervous up here, but I am assured that we are all dear friends here, and some of us are even married. So I'm going to let Mel is up here for some words too, and we haven't rehearsed. We are tag teaming this morning, and I will.
Thank you.
Wow.
So,
I don't know if he's gonna.
I don't know if I put my glasses down and look this, would that make you believe that I have some rabbinic authority? Likely not. We are, I'm told, the first couple that's attempted to do this from this pulpit, from this stage. I don't know if there's any predecessors, and I don't know whether there will be any successors in this duo.
Is there something that is louder? Is there something? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh.
Is this better?
I wonder if
Now I feel like I'm old and,
move down.
how's this? Is this better? Okay. I understand, are the first couple that's attempted to stand here and share a weekly parashah with you. We've had, as some of you know, 50 years in rehearsing this, but we haven't put special effort. In fact, we've been in separate rooms in our home without sharing very much of what each of us has been doing to learn during this week. So we'll see how this ad lib proceeds this morning. I do want to honor and acknowledge our close to 40 years of study with Rabbi Klein. We've known Roger many years and studied with him together with Russell and Nancy Bengiad. So it's a particular honor and pleasure, I think, to be standing on this side of the lectern to share with you some thoughts and engage you in some conversation. I'll stop here. Vivian, we've decided that trying to do this together is probably too difficult to dance, so we're going to do this in sequence rather than in tandem.
Lovely. Thank you. Can can you hear me, or? Yes. Can you hear me? Maybe it's just that I'm shorter. Mine is not ad lib. I'm teeing us up today. But in the event, and it's often the case, that Roger is listening in, I want to send our congratulations to him for the graduation of his granddaughter in Gallaudet University, Washington, D.C. At Roger's request, while he's away this weekend, you can see Val and I are your servers today, and we are tag teaming as best we can. And we've prepared a menu, so to speak. So I will just say that we are honored and humbled to be here. And whatever comes of this conversation, we rely on the energy of this wonderful room. Again, as I say, we've been dear friends and new friends together on this journey. And so I'm counting on everyone to keep us going. On a personal note, I also want to thank Roger, who kindly met us for a 2-hour coffee break last week to help us work out our thoughts through today's Parsha, Kedoshim, on the topic of holiness. And of course, given that topic, Roger suggested, do whatever moves you. We had no idea what we were getting into here. But standing here, I will also share with you that from my seat there, I often take a mental walk through the woods. It calms me somehow. It helps me think. So please, relax, refill your coffee cup, take a pastry, and consider the next hour or so as a slow, gentle walk under the canopy, the weeds, and the words of Torah. And with thanks, bagels and thanks for bagels from Sue and Bob Curtis, streaming Eileen and Gary Kamer, and bagel pickup Maud. Thank you, and flowers. Maida and okay. And so without preamble, I'm taking my time. We get to blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who hails us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with the words of Torah. Amen. Amen. So, here we are, all in, as we say at Temple, left to our own devices, and for want of Roger's vast rabbinic knowledge from all things Torah, Talmud, Jewish history, theology, philosophy, from Aristotle to Maimonides, from Kant to Heschel, not to mention the humor and humanity he brings to our discussion with his repartee in music, baseball, tennis, and God knows what else. We all know the drill from this lectern, but we are here today to put all that aside, to read together, to observe and study, to listen and hear from one another. Our Parsha of the week comes from Vayikra, that vulnerable book of Leviticus. We had no idea that's where we would land today. We certainly prefer to skim those words so often leave us cold or lost in a thicket of ancient text, inscrutable laws of sacrifice and purity, priestly rituals and taboos long abandoned in our practice of Judaism. But today, like a bolt of sunlight on a pouring rainy day, we find ourselves at a high point, reading Leviticus, Kedoshim, the Parsha where God bids Moses to deliver a code of ethics to the entire community of Israel in a stunning commandment. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. In English, the line scanned as a powerfully eloquent equation. But in Hebrew, where we haven't the grammar, we find a curious distinction in the translation for the word holy. I'll walk through this. You shall be kiddoshim, it says in Hebrew, the plural of holy, the holy ones, as we could translate it. For I, the Lord, your God, am holy. Kadosh. Kadosh is in our most familiar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, 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 the Lord of hosts. The entire world is filled with his glory. We stop right there. It's a stunning line. Not to mince words here, but given the theme of holiness in our parsha, I believe we're discussing more than the correct modifying adjective here. The word kadosh is the adjective regularly applied to divinity, but it also applies to the sanctity of time and place, of family and community, of business and social relations, of civic and criminal law. In other words, the Parsha Kedoshim seems to cover the bases, implying the larger sense of divinity, deeply connected but distinctly separate from humanity in virtually all aspects of life. You could take me to task for this, but that's about as literal and literary as I can get this morning, and I've only gotten as far as the 14th word of the Parsha in Kedoshim. As Mel and I discovered in our preparation for Torah study this week, I've been saying this a little bit, but in the last 2 weeks that we've been studying, every day seems like Shabbat. Reading into the words of Kedoshim is at best a rigorous exercise. Whether we read its opening lines literally or metaphorically as God's words, the lines seem to call out to us, to listen, to explore and question, to learn from one another, and to the task of asking, what in the world is holiness, and what does holiness mean to me? No pressure to answer these questions, but let's at least start on the same page. In your Chumash on 185. And I am going to propose that we read Passover style, line for line, from the top. And I'm going to ask Mia to read the first line, the first and two verses in Hebrew. And then again, we'll read in one line at a time, one verse at a time. And I'm going to start in the center here at this table and go around till we see how it goes. But I want to hear our voices together because I think there's power in that. Please, Ellen. Oh, sorry.
Say where we are.
Oh, 185.
I have it on my computer.
Oh,
so.
excuse me.
Chapter 19.
Exodus 19.
Leviticus.
Yeah. Woo. Wrong. I sent you another great passage, but that's okay. Right. The Lord spoke to Moses.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל כל עדת ישראל, אל כל עדת בני ישראל, ואמרת אליהם, קדושים תהיו, כי קדוש אני, אדוני אלוהיכם.
Okay. And Jackie, if you want to take it in English then, start
The Lord
from.
spoke to Moses, saying,
Yes, thank you.
Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you should be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. More.
Maud?
Okay. You shall be holy.
You shall three.
You shall each revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I, the Lord, am your God.
Oh, if you want to,
Um,
I can fill in if you want and then go to the next, or Ellen?
I can't find it.
Okay. Do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourself. I, the Lord, am your God. If this is, keep going if, sure, Joan.
When you shall sacrifice an offering of well-being to the Lord,
And let's go to, that's a long paragraph. Let's go along, let's skip 6 and go to 9, when you reap. Candy?
When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard here, or gather the fallen fruit of your harvest. You shall leave it for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God.
Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable going?
You shall not steal, you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord.
Jim? Can we flip to,
You shall not defraud your fellow, you shall not
I
commit
mean,
robbery.
Jeff.
The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning.
You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord.
You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsmen fairly. Do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am the Lord.
You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kinsmen, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord.
And Nancy, the last one, we're going to only read to 19.
You shall not have your,
You shall, yeah, 19.
you shall not observe my laws.
And as long as we're going to also just skip to 32, Eddie? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just that I didn't bring my glasses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You shall rise before the aged, oh, I like that, and show deference to the old. You shall fear your God, I am the Lord.
Beautiful. And whoever's uncomfortable or comfortable, go ahead. May, yeah.
When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I, the Lord, am your God.
Zach? Oh, I'm sorry. We're at, 35. You shall not falsify.
You shall not falsely measures of, you shall not falsify measures of length, weight, or capacity. You shall have an honest balance, honest weights, and honest,
Yeah.
how's that, ephah, and an honest pin.
I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord am your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt. You shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my rules. I am the Lord.
Thank you. I was reading a book, and I didn't bring it, but it gave the imagery that we are to stumble over these words. We stumble upon them. They are not easy words. They're not easy to, and I think that was lovely, really. Even though it brought us together. I'm going to ask, what in those lines, since we've read them together, what resonates most to you in the passages? Or were there any surprises in those lines? So they're so familiar. Yes, and
It seems that we as a society don't adhere to these laws.
and Malcolm, yes, Eddie.
You know, the one thing that, I don't know if God has a great sense of humor or what, but when he says, be holy because I am holy. I mean, seriously? You want us to be like you? An omnipotent, all-knowing God wants us to be like him. I think it's not fair. I mean, it's like Michael Jordan asking you to make a three-shooter like him. I mean, and that's even lame compared to what he's asking. But I don't know if he's like I said, having a great sense of humor, or if he's actually thinking that we have that potential. And that's a question that I always ask when I read those verses.
Well,
So hold on to that. I'll
I-
propose some possible answers.
All right.
I think that's where we tag team, and I'm happy to sit down. Mel, yes. Thank you for that question.
So, yes, thank you, Eddie.
I think in response to what you're saying, simply you make an attempt, it's understood you can't get there. If for not the reason alone that you don't have enough time. Remember, time's irrelevant to God. You're here for a very short period, so it's obvious you can't do all this. But you gotta try. And it's interesting that you're supposed to forgive your family, your countrymen, you're supposed to forgive all these things, which you know darn well you can't. It's not human. Somebody does you a terrible wrong. It's nice to say I forgive you, but do you? But you attempt it. Because we all have different views, we all have different prejudices. We all have false first impressions based on something else that remind us of something else. And the whole point is an attempt to do these godly things. Maybe you'll get partway there, maybe you won't get there at all, but you gotta try. Same thing as getting out of bed in the morning. Maybe you had a horrible day yesterday, and I just don't want to face it. You gotta get up, and you gotta try. And I think that's what this is talking about.
Thank you.
I find it interesting. There's certain Ani Adonai, I'm God, that it appears again and again. And I was wondering, what does it try to prove?
Was there another?
I think Jim has it very correct. This portion distinguishes Judaism from a lot of other religions. In a lot of other religions, to be holy is to go onto a mountaintop and meditate in a cave. Is to separate yourself from people as an individual journey to find a God individual to you. It's a very selfish journey to find your holiness, right? God in this portion saying, be holy like me. He's not saying create the world in 6 days. He's saying you become holy like me by doing little things every day, all the time. You know, the corners of your field, the gleanings, the kind word to the stranger, the honoring your parents. Every opportunity, every choice you make, you can elevate that choice from an animal instinct drive or to a drive that has a higher purpose linked to a higher purpose. And he's telling you, it is both simple, in everyday choices, and it's hard because you have to keep making the choices all day long.
So to me, an alternate name for the holiness code for this is really the first social contract. Because a lot of this deals with dealing with your fellow tribesmen, clansmen, society, whatever. And it wasn't until the 17th, 18th century that we get the social contract based on the Age of Reason, and where this is a social contract based on religious holiness.
I'm going to step back just for a few seconds, just to create some context. I have a variety of resources that I've read about and will read from about this notion of holiness. And I don't profess to say that any of them is right or wrong, but just gave me some insight into what this opening statement of this Parashah Kedoshim is instructing us to do, or what it is about. So Leviticus, this parashah begins in Leviticus 19, verse 1, and as we've read, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And the word holy, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but the word holy is a word in English, in terms of its literal meaning, is hard to grasp. We have a lot of concepts of what holiness is about. And looking back to the Hebrew and the meaning of the Hebrew word, it seems that the word kadosh means set apart or separate. And we'll try to understand that. I'll try to make sense a little bit of that as I make remarks from some of these authors or commentators. I want to put this just for a moment, though, in context, this Parashah Kedoshim, in context about what we've read before and what follows. To me, in reading this, and to answer Vivian's question, what these verses struck me is, this sounds like the Ten Commandments to me. And so it has elements of that, but the words, the Hebrew words and the translation are not literally the Ten Commandments. So the first appearance we have of the Ten Commandments is in Exodus, and in Exodus 19, even before the Ten Commandments are enumerated in chapter 20, there is something interesting to me. In Exodus 19:6, we see the language, "You shall be, now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. But you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel." This is God speaking to Moses. And in Exodus 20, we have the recitation of the Ten Commandments as we know them most explicitly. We find that the words of the Ten Commandments again once more in Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning in verse 6. And there they are restated almost word for word from what we have in Exodus chapter 20. The words here in Leviticus, though, are a little bit different, and they are in the midst of a number of other commandments or mitzvot. But returning just for a second to these opening verses in Leviticus, the English says, speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy ones, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. One thing that's distinctive in terms of this instruction from God to Moses is God's instructing Moses to speak to the entire community of Israel. And the purpose is that these are embedded in these words are essential principles of the Torah. The 10 Commandments are embedded in this speech that Moses is instructed by God to give to the entire Israelite community. The word kadosh, or its root, appears more than 900 times in the 5 books. As to its, and now I'm reading from a narrative which I discovered in a contemporary publication. As to its origin meaning, the root kaf dalet shin is not just a root in Hebrew. It appears in other Semitic languages as well. As to its original meaning, it is possible that kadosh dalet shin was a root that fundamentally meant something abstract, that is, imbued with a divine quality, but it is otherwise written. Every enlightened person knows that words indicating spiritual, intellectual concepts that are not perceptible to the senses are all transferred terms that originally indicated tangible things. Or to put more simply, words usually have concrete meanings before they develop abstract meanings. A widespread view of kaf dalet shin originally meant separate. Separate. Some believe that separation is the original concrete meaning of this kaf dalet shin. Others suggest that it means splendid or pure. An unusual alternative approach is possible as well. In this view, the root kaf dalet shin is a combination of 2 words and originally meant burnt in a fire. The original sense of the word kodesh reflected a tangible thing, the burning of sacrifices. The word was later transferred to anything specifically dedicated to the honor of God, even if it was not burned. In a major part of this work, the author summarizes the theories of holiness that he finds among traditional Jewish sources. The author writes that if we go through all of Rashi's comments on biblical instructions to be kadosh, we find that Rashi focuses his comments on the areas of forbidden sexual relations, forbidden foods, and forbidden worship. Thus, it seems that according to Rashi, the instruction to be kadosh is not something that applies to all the commandments. Rather, it seems to mean separate yourself from forbidden things. According to Nachmanides, the Torah specified specific things in Leviticus 19:2, categorically prohibited, and then gave additional general command here that we should separate ourselves from things that are permitted. One scholar explains the rationale for Nachmanides as follows. The mere observance of legalities does not ensure one becoming a holy person, which is the ultimate purpose of the commandments. Something more, being kadosh, is also commanded. So while Rashi has us separating from the forbidden, Nachmanides has us separating from the permitted. It's not just to avoid things that are forbidden. It is to engage in things that are encouraged, but it is something more. Maimonides takes an entirely different approach. According to Maimonides, the instruction there is, the instruction there, that is in 19.2, is a mere general one, not a specific commandment. It is merely synonymous with an instruction to observe all of the commandments. Maimonides writes, there is no difference between saying, you shall be holy, and saying, observe my commandments. Therefore, Maimonides does not count Leviticus 19 as one of the 613 commandments, but Nachmanides' view is it is a specific commandment. I'm going to relate to a book that I haven't read, but I've read extensively from, called A Theology of Holiness, Historical, Exegetical, and Philosophical Perspectives. It was published in 2018 by Alec Goldstein. And these words are a commentator's observations or thoughts about that book. And some of them emphasize or reinforce what I've just referred to. Commentaries have always weighted down the first half of the verse, thou shalt be holy, when compared to its second, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Perhaps Judaism's preoccupations with God's expectations of humankind distracts us from our own vision of God. This book argues for a holiness rooted in the existence of a divine obligation, but made manifest in a life having fulfilled God's will. The book argues that holiness has two components, separated and elevated. In justifying this conclusion, Goldstein examines associated roots that appear in confluence or in contrast to Kaf Dalet Shin through the Tanakh. The term holy exists in modern language, but it has been emptied of meaning, much like Alexander McIntyre's extended metaphor regarding virtue. Holiness exists as a word, but not much more. Goldstein's recreation begins and concludes with obligation. This tracks to another critical depiction of modern religiosity. Chaim Soloveitchik, in his classic Rupture and Reconstruction, which I'll refer to later, describes the substitution of religious law for genuine religious experience. Roger frequently talks to us about, or creates this illusion or idea of the horizontal and the vertical. To me, the horizontal is the experience in the world we live in and our relationships to one another and how we observe these commandments in relationship to our actions and the actions of others. The vertical is this transcendent relationship, and that those are both a part of our experiencing God and fulfilling this commandment of being holy. Both the horizontal, the acts that we perform every day and to observe, as well as the vertical, this transcendent relationship. Over this 2-hour cup of coffee that we had with Roger, I argued as the simple one, to take a Passover analogy, that for me, these laws, with absent the context of God and religion, this book I couldn't imagine for me, as having value, of having a direction for me. He responded, and not necessarily because he believed otherwise, but I think just for argument's sake, that a Kantian view of the world says that a set of laws, a set of logic, a set of ethics can exist without the need for the existence of God, without the existence of religion. And I didn't attempt to argue with Roger, but just for me, my experience of Judaism is a way for me to experience this world, and the laws that we are obligated to, however well or imperfectly we follow those laws, are not on the basis of morals or ethics or what Kant has to say, but come from this book and from a divine message that we've been given through Moses and through this book.
Well, as long as you brought up that conversation, I took the slightly different tack, and to me, the billboard of our discussion is captured. This is to me by, I'm reading the wrong thing, by Buber. Okay.
It would be helpful if you
I'm going to.
stood up and spoke to them.
Oh, all right. Hang on a second. I have these.
Especially for the ones in broadcast.
Buber's billboard to me.
Speak.
Oh, Buber takes an existential view, and his words are, real life is in meeting. And make sure I have that. Apologies, I'm hanging on here for okay, let's try that again. All real life is meaning. And I was in a discussion that to me caught the essence of that. This is one of his quotes from I and Thou, and his whole concept of I and Thou is beyond reading if you try to. But the space between I and Thou is where holiness resides, for example. He defines Thou as a total, not as God necessarily. The Thou in Buber is not God, but one another in totality, seeing one another for their wholeness, oneness. And these are fleeting moments. We can't, as Eddie said, we can't walk around being holy. And I struggled a lot with the concept of, is God and godlike even a concept? Are we godlike? No. We can only find moments of transcendence, as Malcolm is saying, not by looking up, but by looking through. That's at least where I am. I could go on. I think I'll just, I'm going to let Malcolm continue, but I have some quotes, some things I'm throwing around the room, and and I don't have them for everybody, but I do have some quotes.
I'm going to, Jim.
So
But don't you think,
I'll pass
given
these.
the imperfections we all have, humanity shows it 24/7, all these negative inclinations that are part of us, whether you like it or not. Don't you think this whole thing spring, they have leaves in the fall, they don't bother each other. People cause chaos all the time. And to me, all these rules are an attempt to keep it at a minimum. Because most of these rules are saying, don't do this, don't do that, which by implication means we're going to do it. It doesn't say, some of them do say, go do this, go do that. But in general, there's an implied almost punishment if you do what you naturally tend to do. So what I'm suggesting to you is, yeah, we can pick on each individual rule, that's fine. But I think the overall attempt is to create an organized society so at the extreme, which hasn't worked, we don't kill each other, which we seem to be hell-bent on doing since time immemorial. And that's my take on all the rules, and we can go and pinpoint each one. And the idea of trying to be holy is to just try to have some sense of positive action rather than all this negative stuff. Killing each other, and I'm right, and you're wrong, and all that kind of thing. So we can go on, and we will, about each specific thing, but I believe that's the overall attempt of not only Judaism, but every other religion.
I would think that before there was a religion per se, groups of people found that they had to live by certain laws, like do not murder. It doesn't mean everybody followed it, but that was the norm, the hope that they could live in a community where there was peace. That didn't mean they didn't attack another community, but at least among themselves, they wanted peace, they wanted reverence for their older people because they had to take care of them. They wanted respect for the people who didn't raise the food, but they shared in the food. I would think that those concepts are hopefully universal.
Yeah, the distinction, I'm gonna, there are a couple other comments, I think, but just in responding to both of you, the distinction I was trying to make is these are not laws of man, these are divine laws. These are laws given to us by God. So we are not doing them because we think they have a ethical basis. We think that they have a moral basis. We follow these laws, or we attempt to follow these laws, because these are divinely inspired. That's the distinction I'm making. I'm interested in a judicial perspective on this. So, Stuart?
Let me give an historical presentation. These laws, these precepts, come from Hammurabi in Babylon, 2,000 years before the description in the Bible, or 1,000 years, whatever. And I think in their respect, they come from kingly I don't follow that at all. Because of the historical requirements those come from.
Let me repeat for the purposes of folks at
Oh,
home,
sure.
as well as for making sure I'm, so, I think Stuart, is saying, historically, these commandments
Yeah.
existed long before this book was written, or long before the nation of the Israeli people, the Jewish people, formed a religion. So that they have a basis. What I hear you saying is these are not godly
No,
commandments.
they're royal.
So, do these instructions, how are these instructions different or distinguished from Kant's instructions? Or arguments on establishing an ethical or moral way of being, or Hammurabian way of living or being? And you don't have to answer that. No.
I went and got the prayer book.
Yeah.
Because I've been debating Rabbi Klein since last fall about why it is that Reform has the third paragraph of the Via Haftav, which is rooted, right in where it says in Numbers, but also in the Deuteronomy section, and so much repetition throughout the Torah. But to go back to what was being said in terms of the origins being prior to the Hebrew Bible, right in here it says, "Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's, foot." Then it goes on. "There's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together." So there's something here about the notion that even before the Ten Commandments were given, before this section of Leviticus, we already sort of knew that we had to, live together in a peaceful and ethical way in some way. There were pre-ethical concepts that we understood deeply, and having just said the word pre-ethical, it just reminds me that yeah. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Maida, did you have a comment? Eddie?
Well, I do know about Hammurabi law, not much. I'm not a lawyer or anything. But there is a big difference between the law codes of ancient and the Bible, especially on the emphasis of protecting the poor, the stranger, basically the weak. Whereas other societies where they would actually protect their own, it was more of a what can I get or an investment, meaning they would protect the strong, the ones that could actually work in the land, but dismiss the weak. And that's where the Torah revolutionizes the whole concept. It's not just those that are powerful. It's not just justice for men. It's not just justice. It's for everyone. And the widow, the poor, the stranger, And I believe that is the main difference. And that's what sets us kedoshim from the other nations.
I'd like to piggyback on Eddie's, first of all, it begins with the law, with the need of community for law and order, and, the distinction that Eddie is making is between law and mitzvot. And that gets us to the question or the discussion of practice, ritual, what those play in handing down values. shades of holiness, mitzvah, value, generations hanging on to a tenet of caring and consciousness about the other. So I ran out.
I think there's another frame of not just looking at your action towards the other, but also looking at your inward actions and proclivity to do certain events. And I think this goes all the way back to Genesis 4, when God talks to Cain, and he says, surely if you do right, there is uplift, but if you do not do right, sin couches at the door. Its urges toward you, yet you can be its master. And so I think that there's a psychological insight of people's tendency to be look inward, be selfish, and the rest of the Torah kind of addresses that.
For me, the holiness of what in the context of Judaism is that we're not inherently sinful, guilty, shameful, but we have a spark of divinity within us because B'Tselem Elohim, we're created in God's image. It doesn't mean we're like God or we are God, but that we have inclinations. We have inclinations towards not doing good. That's acknowledged freely, and we have rules for that. But we also have the inclination to behave in the transcendent ways, and those transcendent ways can be in art, because we're human, small and daily. And one of the most important ways to do that is to recognize the divinity, the human spark, the divine spark, the godliness of other people and other of God's creations. Notice, I'm not sure I even think about it, but it helps me to have this framework and to believe these things, even if I question God and what that means and what that is. And I think that's inherently Jewish as well, because, the word Jacob means Jacob's name is changed to Israel, and Israel means to struggle with God. So that is affirming. The questioning itself is holy, and the struggle itself is holy, because that in and of itself helps us to repair the world. And the minute the world was created, it became separate from God, which made it imperfect. And so all of our efforts, however small, are holy in perfecting it.
I was looking for I can't find it right this moment, but I want to piggyback on what you've just said and a couple of other folks have said. The notion that humankind can have holy behavior or features or approach holiness is a revolutionary from a historical history of religion point of view, is a revolutionary or novel concept. Other religions don't contemplate that humankind can either approach or aspire to holiness. So that is a special, or from a historical point of view in the development of peoples and religions, a remarkable perspective or position.
What you're pointing to, I think, is the covenant, which is revolutionary, in that it is a push and pull right there of if you are, then you will be, which is back to the line that I struggled with is, you shall be holy, for I am your God, am holy. It is not that we're holy, just trying to reach. It is a work in progress, and it's something that is renewal and everlasting, the unattainable. There's no one going to get there. We're mortal. And the earth is grounding us, but there are moments where we see more. Do more.
I want to read from a couple of other sources for a moment or two, and then I want to focus a little bit more on this notion of the vertical and the horizontal, and the experience, and in the context of experiencing holiness. How does one attain the status of kedusha, holiness, commanded in the Parashat Kedoshim? Some maintain that the pathway to holiness is to separate from the real world. Suppressing the body is the only way the soul can soar. Rav Dov Soloveitchik points out that this is the predominant approach of most faith communities. The Ish Hada'at, the universal religious person, as Soloveitchik terms it, is the religious figure who sees the escape from the body as a prerequisite for spiritual striving. There is a more mainstream Jewish approach to Kedusha. It suggests that the body is neither to be vilified nor glorified. Every aspect of human physical activity is to be sanctified. Thus Soloveitchik writes, this, Soloveitchik writes, is the goal of each halakha, to apply Jewish law to every aspect of life, ennobling and, yes, kedushifying our every endeavor. So that everything we do each day is a part of holiness. It is not simply escaping the world to a ascetic life where our relationship is an attempt at solely a transcendent relationship with God. The Ish Halakha understands Kedusha differently. Every discipline, whether it be chemistry, language, or medicine, are all potentially aspects of Torah. As Avram Yitzhak Kook has pointed out, there is nothing unholy, there is only the holy and the not yet holy. If one studies Torah in an intense fashion, it will give new meaning, new direction, new purpose, and in the end, sanctify whole. Whole is a permanent status. It can transform into Kodesh. For the Ish Halakha, there is nothing in the world devoid of God's imprint. The way one loves, the way one conducts oneself in business, the way one eats, are all no less holy than praying, learning, and fasting. For the Ish Hada'at, the movement is from this world, the world of the body and soul, to the next world, the world of pure soul. Death is a release from the imprisonment of the body. This philosophy is espoused by many fundamentalist Christian and Muslims. For them, redemption comes only through death. For Torah, the movement is in the reverse, from the other world to this world, to take the teachings of the Torah from the world beyond and to apply it to this world, sanctifying every aspect of human life. For Torah, ultimate sanctification comes through living every moment a life of Torah ethics. This, in fact, is the challenge of this week's portion. Kiddushim tihiyu. You shall be holy. This is a post by Rabbi Avi Weiss, posted in May 21st, 2016, the meaning of the word kadosh. I have links to all of these, but, and if anyone's interested, I can provide you all of these links, but I don't walk around with, like, Rabbi Klein does with books, and it's the best I can do in a week, folks. Parenthetically, a couple of things that just, as an aside, informed me in terms of standing here. I did the back of the envelope. So Roger is a few years older than Vivian and I are. He's explained that he was not particularly inclined toward Judaism or to religion as a kid, so my rough math, if it started about the age of 20, and I think he's around 80 or so, and if I made estimates of how much of his life he is devoted to this study, I come up to, in round figures, about 35,000 or 40,000 hours. I've given him time off for vacation and for sleep and eating and other sorts of things. So, generously, I perhaps devoted, 15 or 20 hours to learning about Kedushim. So, so I'm not kidding myself. The other thing that was informative, so as Vivian explained, we spent nearly 2 hours sitting with him over coffee about 2 weeks ago in Barnes & Noble, as he offered to help us think about what we were going to do. And it was really very enjoyable for any of you who've spent some time with Roger one-on-one. He's just a wonderful person and enjoyable to talk with. So we had coffee and talked, and finally we decided we could have talked some more, but he needed to get on with the rest of his day or the rest of his week. We got up and said thank you to one another, and he wandered off into the bookstore, and he stopped at the section of books which is the section on philosophy. I never go to the section of philosophy. I mean, I'm not assigning but, so this was the best I could do, with the time available and with my limited background and knowledge of Judaism
Okay,
and
I'm
Torah.
waving my hand. May I add that in that conversation, I remember very little other than the fact that we were sitting together and actually a person, a fellow sitting next to us turned around and said, "Are you speaking of Leviticus?" And that's what we were doing. We were studying Torah together. Not all the time, but he was drawing us in, we were drawn in, and we were exchanging, and there was an I and not I, and a thou and not Roger, but the space between us was, I would venture to say, holy-ish. I mean, was it profound? Only in the fact that we got together. Only in the fact that he brought us here to you, and we've been struggling with this. And that is, in Roger's wisdom, why he puts us up here. So that, each of us have something amazing to bring. And we know that because we're here every week. And we've created a circle, and I'm now putting my back to this part of it, but we've created a circle here that is more than Torah study. It is a circle that we really cherish. And holiness.
Okay, I had my hand up, but I didn't want to say something. You're wonderful teachers, I really appreciate this, and all those comments.
I think that for human society to exist, we have to observe some of those 10 commandments, because if you kill, if you thief, a society cannot last. So I think that Judaism introduced the notion of God, but I think that the rules were there and they are necessary just for the survival of humankind. So Eddie was mentioning that unlike Hammurabi's laws, and I don't know anything about it, that the Judaism brings in the notion of take care of the weak and the suppressed and everything. So I guess that's an addition, and I don't know if Hammurabi is really what you said, take care of yourself, don't worry about the others. But I still think that basically the morality is inherent or needed for our existence.
But I think in all this, you have to be very careful to avoid an arrogance. If you get that self-feeling that I'm holy and I've really done all this good, I think it can easily lead to arrogance because along with all these other sayings, remember the road to hell was paved with good intentions. And you have to be careful if you start thinking you're somehow better in some way than the other guy, even though you don't like him, even if you know he's wrong, at least in your head. So this notion of holiness needs to be tempered with humbleness, but it seldom is.
I think Judaism speaks aggressively against that point of view. Right? Judaism and Torah says the righteous of all nations shall inherit a piece of the world to come. Right? Arrogance is saying you have to join my religion club or you don't get a key to heaven. And almost every other religion has rites and rituals and membership requirements to pass through this world's veil to the next. Judaism says no. Judaism says there are 7 Noahide laws for everybody else. We don't even really want you to become Jewish. We don't proselytize. You have a role in heaven without us. And exactly to your point, our role as separate is to be an example and to take on the burden of 613 mitzvot and lead by that example. And if anything, God regularly spanks us down in every generation to push down any arrogance we've assumed in that span.
Stuart, before you speak, I hope I wasn't perceived as attacking your perspective.
No.
Okay.
But to counter the point that was just made, God is not holy. He instructs Saul to kill the women and children. He instructs Abram to kill he intends to kill the inhabitants of Sodom, even if there are 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 honest men, let alone women. God is not holy.
Please.
My pushback on that in often is that there is an arrogance of humankind that we are the height of all development from all time until now, right? Sometimes I look at God and I think we have every right to question the same way an earthworm would question calculus. There are things I can't know. You know, when it comes to that beyond this world, I'm an earthworm contemplating calculus. But I know, as I try to teach my children, if you get nothing else from religion, that there is a God and it's not you. And I strive to study Torah intently to understand what this map was given. As someone spoke of Hammurabi, if you want to look at the map direction, the Kabbalah would tell us that God looked into Torah and used Torah as a map to create this world. And then Torah was revealed to this world at Sinai, but it existed prior to this world. And there's nothing that kept anyone prior to Mount Sinai to seeing some of those facts. And there's a story of Moses. Moses saw the burning bush. But there's people that would say, the sages, that that bush was always burning and had been burning for time before Moses. But Moses was the first to look and notice, right? Which doesn't mean the truth didn't exist prior. And Hammurabi, I would say, had a vision to that truth.
There are one or two, thank you. There are one or two other points I wanted to share, unless you guys, if you're already exhausted. I'm going to read a little bit further about the meaning of holiness, and I want to use that as a segue to we haven't talked a lot about this vertical relationship and this transcendent relationship, and I want to spend a minute or two talking about that and also share my own personal perspective. This is a further exploration of what kadosh means, and it characterizes it in, if you will, holy people, holy time, holy place, and holy relationships. And kadosh, the definition which is put forward here, is to be cut off, separated, to be or become pure, sacred. The separated quality is probably the basic meaning of the Hebrew word kadosh, much like the English word distinguished, which can mean both separate and special. Kadosh begins by meaning separate and ends by meaning special or sacred or elevated. Holy people. From Leviticus 19, God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak unto all the congregation of Israel, you shall be holy." God is separate from the world and transcends it, but God is not withdrawn from it. That is, the people of Israel must, in imitating God, by being a holy nation, similarly not withdraw from the world, but rather radiate a positive influence on it through every aspect of Jewish living. Holy time. The heavens and earth were finished, and all the host of them. This is Genesis 2. And on the seventh day, God finished his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day. And God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, made it holy. Because that in it he stopped from all his work which God in creating it had made. This is not the first mention of Shabbat in the Torah. It is also the first, this is not just the first mention of Shabbat in the Torah. It is also the first occurrence of the word holiness. Holiness here and throughout the Bible is defined by the act of stopping. Before we can discover the holiness within our lives, we must first imitate God and stop. A holy time. A holy space. From Genesis 28, and Jacob awakened out of his sleep, and he said, "Surely the God is in this place, and I knew it not." And he was afraid and said, "How full of awe is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." And finally, holy relationships. From Exodus 19, "Now therefore, if ye will hearken unto my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be mine own treasure from among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy community. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. And from Jewish wedding vows, you are made holy to me with this ring according to the laws of Moses and Israel. So these are, from this author's point of view, how and we experience, or where we experience holiness as a people, in a time, in a place, and in relationships. I want to, my last comment just relate to personal experience, I guess, and this notion of transcendence for me. I don't know what each of your day-to-day experience is, but I don't feel it wholly as I wake up every morning and walk around and do whatever I do each day. I'd like to think, or I hope, that some of my, or most of my actions are informed by halakha. Whether I am a learned student of the commandments or not, I try to conduct my life according to what I believe are those instructions of the 613 commandments. The experience of transcendence is one that is more exceptional or uncommon for me, or not an everyday experience, I would say. I suppose one could wonder at the nature of existence, the existence of a tree, the existence of the world, and have that be a transcendent experience. I don't, or listening to beautiful music, or looking at a work of art, and in some way seeing that as a transcendent experience. I don't personally feel I have that sort of sense of that being in the world as a divinely authored experience each day. I can just cite a couple of things that are particular in the cycle of life, or the cycle of a year. I just relate to a couple of experiences. One which is annual, one is a life cycle event, which to me provided me a very intimate sense of this relationship to God, the relationship with the divine. And one of them is at the high holy days, but in particular the hearing and experiencing of the Unatana Toka. I don't know how well each of you knows that poem, that piece of our liturgy, and its words are, let us proclaim the awful power of this day and the holiness of this day. But even without the words, the poetry and the music of that experience for me is overpowering. It's emotionally overpowering to me. We raised our children in our now sister congregation, or one congregation, Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple. And one of the things that I live with today, although I can't hear it anymore, but I still have it, is Rabbi Lelyveld beginning the story of the Unatana Toka and Rabbi Amnon, and Cantor Sarah Sager beginning the music of the Unatana Toka. And it's in an entirety, that prayer, that poem, puts me in a religious and I guess an emotional state of feeling a transcendent relationship. Maybe many of you have that experience. services each week, at Shabbat services. Maybe you have that in experiencing the world, but the Unatana Tokef for me is an exceptionally powerful experience and conjures this relationship I have, this transcendent relationship that I feel and I have. Another that, and I shared this with Roger also, some of you know, our grandson just celebrated bar mitzvah here a month and a half ago or so. And, you know, we as proud parents or proud grandparents are moved by that. But I felt both from, and being with a congregation on that morning of friends and family, and in a holy space of the chapel, and with a rabbi officiating, Rabbi Klein, who we've known for 40 years, was a transcendent experience for me, a sense of holiness. I suppose, you know, perhaps the ego is the seeing your issue, your offspring, but I feel like it was more than that, of introducing a generation and a next generation into this world of Judaism, and in the experience of reading from the Torah and celebrating in this religious ceremony is, yeah, I was overcome with emotion. I was sitting in the front row and I couldn't stop crying, and I almost feel that same feeling, even just describing it today. But as I say, I sense it as a connection with God. So, I've read a whole book about the Unatana Tokef. I think it's a fascinating piece of liturgy, and it's really inspiring to me. The last thing I'll just leave you with is, I stumbled on, just toward the end of this week, an essay written by Chaim Soloveitchik, which was written in 1994 in Tradition, which is, I think, an online publication, Orthodox publication. But it's entitled The Transformation it's entitled Rupture and Reconstruction, The Transformation of Contemporary Orthodoxy. And it goes on for 100 pages. Only 60 of those pages are actual text, the other are notes, but this is not just bibliography, it's discussion. So I won't claim to have read the whole thing, and I certainly don't come from an Orthodox tradition or as a part of this congregation relate to the Orthodoxy, but he does in it explore both this horizontal and vertical set of relationships, and he bemoans or longs for misses what he believes are in our contemporary life, even in the Haredi Orthodox life, this absence of the transcendent experience. The world we live in is so suffused with the horizontal and the today, and that the answers are in science, or the answers are in Wikipedia, or the answers are in Google, that we've lost, we have lost room for this transcendent experience. And it's, I think, it's an interesting read. So, I'm out of gas.
Thank you very much.
I would only caution what I'm going to call the trap of the transcendent. Don't look for big transcendent moments, right? A sage once said, nature is just the aggregation of miracles that we've become bored with. soft, gentle wind, right? When Moses was in Egypt, the Egyptian magicians duplicated blood, turning the Nile into blood, duplicated frogs. Only when it got to the plague of lice, the smallest, did the Egyptian magicians say, we can't do this. This is God. You know, we can fly to the moon. We can't make a seed or a cell. You know, the Hasidics talk about unleashing sparks of God, not finding bonfires of God. And people have often talked about trapped in the darkness of vast darkness, all you need is a candle in the distance to set a direction. If we wait for gigantic moments, we miss thousands of small moments. That's why we love children, right? You see a child giggling at a butterfly because they see the transcendence we become bored to. And we can get that back again.
Thank you. One last thought to leave you with, at least from me. We have, at the beginning of this session and at every session, we recite a prayer which starts, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu. We are hallowed by, and kiddushim. So we are, this is a holy moment, as Vivian said. This is a holy time that we spend every week learning about Torah. So thank you.
Well, I was going to leave this behind, but because of Jeff, not, and I've left this paper around, and I'm just going to zip through it. I'm not going to read it. But it's moments of holiness that I would deem in the Torah, and it has a lot to do with you. And I've got these noted, but I'm just almost going to read it like a sentence. You'll know these words like the back of your hand. But first off, let there be light. Then to Abraham, go forth. Then again to Abraham, Moses, and Isaiah, Hineni, I am here. In Exodus, Moses, who am I? And God, I will be what I will be. And after the first revelation, we will do. And then in Leviticus today, be holy. Love your fellow as yourself. Oh, we never discussed that. And then here, O Israel, Deuteronomy, we jump to Deuteronomy, and the last, choose life. To me, those are the billboards and the sparks in the story. To me, the Torah is more powerful as story than word. And when I find these moments, they stop me. And that's all I wanted to say.